Lucinda's birthday, 23 years old. She should have been out celebrating. Instead, she was staring into the vacant eyes of a corpse. Happy birthday to her. The phone had jolted her awake. A wrong number, she'd thought, letting it ring. But it buzzed again, insistent, the shrill tone cutting through her dreams of cake and laughter. It was Mark, the night shift mortician, his voice tight with anxiety. He needed to leave early. Family emergency. Could Lucinda cover? A wave of irritation washed over her. Birthdays were for friends, not formaldehyde and the chill of the morgue. Still, a job was a job. Sighing, Lucinda dragged herself out of bed. The morgue awaited. The air hung heavy, thick with the cloying scent of disinfectant, barely masking the metallic tang of death. The cold, sterile environment was a stark contrast to the warmth of life outside these walls. Lucinda shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. The chill seemed to seep into her bones, a constant reminder of where she was. 6 months she'd worked here, and still, the place chilled her to the bone. Not just the temperature, but the very essence of the morgue seemed to cling to her, a cold shadow that followed her home. Mark had left the paperwork on the counter, along with a half-eaten donut. It was a small, almost mundane detail in a place filled with the extraordinary finality of death. John Doe, the file read. Another nameless soul, another story that would never be told. Another soul lost, another body for Lucinda to prepare. Each one was a silent testament to a life that had ended, a chapter closed forever. She sighed, pushing her dark hair out of her eyes and snapping on a pair of latex gloves. The routine was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Time to get to work. The ritual of preparation was a solemn one, each movement deliberate and respectful. The body lay on the steel table, shrouded in a white sheet. The finality of the scene was always striking, a stark reminder of mortality. John Doe, unknown, forgotten. The toe tag was a simple label, but it carried the weight of a life unrecognized. Lucinda's heart ached for him, for the life he'd lived and the stories he'd taken to the grave. She often wondered about the lives behind the names, the people they had been. She picked up the scalpel, the metal cold against her skin. It was a tool of her trade, but also a symbol of the finality she faced every day. No fear, she told herself, just respect. Each body deserved dignity, each life honored in its passing. Lucinda steeled herself, ready to perform her duty with the utmost care and reverence. A noise, faint, almost imperceptible, like a whisper carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist in a place like this. A thud, like a book falling to the floor. The sound echoed through the empty halls, amplifying the eerie silence that followed. Lucinda paused, her hand hovering over John Doe's still chest. She strained her ears, trying to catch any other sounds that might explain the disturbance. Silence. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the steady drip of the faucet in the embalming room. The kind of silence that presses in on you, making every small noise seem magnified. Must have been the pipes, she thought. Old building. Lots of creaks and groans. She tried to convince herself it was nothing more than the building settling. Taking a deep breath, she returned her attention to the body. Her hands moved with practiced precision, but her mind was elsewhere, still lingering on the unexplained noise. She made a careful incision, peeling back the skin. Her focus was split, her ears tuned to the room around her, waiting for any other signs of movement. The thud again, louder this time, closer. It reverberated through the room, making her heart race. It seemed to come from the far end of the room, near the refrigerated drawers where they kept the recently deceased. She hesitated, her eyes fixed on the source of the sound. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Goosebumps erupted on her arms. The air felt colder, as if the temperature had dropped suddenly. Lucinda glanced at the clock on the wall, almost midnight. The witching hour, she thought, when the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest. Her birthday, alone with the dead, and something else, something unseen, lurking in the shadows, whispering from beyond the grave. She felt a presence, an unseen watcher, and knew this night would be one she would never forget. "Hello?" Her voice echoed in the silence. Stupid, she chided herself, talking to ghosts, but the hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her gaze swept the room, taking in the gurneys, the stainless steel cabinets, the instruments laid out on the tray beside John Doe. Instruments that were definitely not arranged the way she'd left them. And where was the scalpel? It had been in her hand a moment ago. She distinctly remembered the weight of it, the cool touch of the metal. Now it was gone, vanished. Lucinda's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. This time it wasn't a book falling, it was heavier, more deliberate, like someone, or something, was pacing inside one of the refrigerated drawers. Each thud sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over her. Panic welled up inside Lucinda, threatening to choke her. She had to get out of there, call for help. But her feet felt rooted to the spot, her body frozen in place by a fear so profound it stole her breath. The scalpel. Where was the scalpel? The thought echoed in her mind, a terrifying mantra. It had to be somewhere. But what if it wasn't? What if... No, don't think about that. Focus. Lucinda forced herself to take a deep breath, willing her racing heart to slow. She had her phone. She could call for help. Fumbling in her pocket, she pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely dial the number. Sarah. She needed Sarah. Her co-worker, her friend. The only other person who understood the strange pull, the eerie allure of the morgue. Sarah, it's me, Lucinda gasped into the phone, her voice trembling. I'm at the morgue. I need you. There's something here. Lucinda, what's wrong? Calm down. I can't understand you. Please, Sarah. Just calm, Lucinda pleaded, her voice cracking with terror. And hurry. The sound of Sarah's familiar voice, even through the phone, was a lifeline. Lucinda clung to it, drawing strength from the knowledge that she wasn't alone, that someone was coming. I'm on my way, Sarah assured her. Just stay put, don't touch anything, I'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. It felt like an eternity. Lucinda's gaze darted around the room, her eyes searching every shadow, every corner. The thudding had stopped, but the silence was almost worse. It was a heavy, expectant silence, as if the unseen presence were holding its breath, waiting. As the minutes ticked by, Lucinda's fear began to give way to a strange sense of unease. It was as if the entity, whatever it was, had moved on. But to where? The screech of tires outside announced Sarah's arrival. Relief flooded Lucinda, washing away the last vestiges of her fear. She wasn't alone anymore. Sarah burst through the door, her face pale with concern. Lucinda, what happened? Are you okay? I don't know, Lucinda stammered, her voice still shaky. I heard noises and the scalpel. It disappeared. Sarah scanned the room, her gaze sharp and assessing. Did you check the security cameras? The cameras? Lucinda's mind raced. The cameras? Of course, they would have caught everything. She turned towards the monitor in the corner, her hand reaching for the switch. And then she saw it. The main door, the one leading into the morgue from the hallway. It was slightly ajar. Open. Lucinda had locked that door, she was sure of it. The heavy metallic click of the deadbolt sliding into place had echoed in the silent hallway, a sound she had grown accustomed to over the years. She distinctly remembered double-checking the deadbolt before starting her work. It was a ritual, a necessary precaution in a place where the dead outnumbered the living. She hadn't used that entrance all night. So how? The question lingered in her mind, gnawing at her sense of security. A cold dread settled in the pit of her stomach, a feeling far more unsettling than the fear she'd experienced before. It was as if the very air around her had thickened, pressing down on her with an invisible weight. Someone or something had been in the morgue with her, something unseen. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, her skin prickling with goosebumps, something that could open locked doors. Lucinda? The voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. Sarah's voice was a worried whisper. What is it? Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of an intruder. Lucinda pointed a trembling finger at the open door. Her hand shook, betraying the fear she tried to keep hidden. I didn't use that entrance, she whispered back, her voice barely audible. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah followed her gaze, her eyes widening in alarm. The open door seemed to mock them, a silent testament to the unknown. The two women stood frozen, staring at the open door, a silent question hanging heavy in the air. Who had been there? What had they wanted? Who or what had walked the halls of the morgue that night? The question echoed in their minds, unanswered and unsettling. The answer, Lucinda feared, was waiting for her in the cold, dark silence. Waiting to be discovered. Waiting to be told. The morgue held its secrets close, and tonight it seemed it had one more to share. But that, dear reader, is a story for another night. The shadows of the morgue would keep their secrets for now, but they would not remain hidden forever.